There's a new spin on casual dining near Drake University. Lucky Horse Beer and Burgers. Craveable faves, flatbreads, delicious burgers, frozen cocktails, and a crazy cool vibe. Get to Lucky Horse Beer and Burgers today.
The morning news on YourIowa.com is brought to you by the Commission on U.S. Territories, striving for equal representation around the globe, and by Keep Iowa First, committed to keeping the Iowa caucuses the first in the nation contest in selecting the presidency of the United States. And now, here's your host, Brent Roske.
Good morning, everybody. It is the 25th of January, Monday morning, and I just checked with our weather department, which is me peeking out the window. The snow has not started yet. We're expecting 10 inches of snow today, so if you live here in the West Des Moines or Central Iowa area, you want to, stay at home, be safe today. We're going to have author Jane Owen on the program. This is her book, Tom Woof and Max the Owl. It is a lovely story. We're going to talk all about this today. Jane Owen was known for being a publicist in Los Angeles, but now she's got this children's book, is working on another one. So excited to be chatting with Jane Owen a little later this morning. The Chiefs and the Buccaneers are going to the NFL Super Bowl. That happened yesterday. And then I saw this tweet. I go on Twitter, so you don't have to. I saw this tweet yesterday. Dan Rather, if we allow truth to become cast with a partisan lens, we will be lost. I know we have seen that trend occur, but the press and the public can demand that we wrest reality back. Liars should not be allowed to peddle their lies as part of political theater. That's something that Dan Rather posted last night. I wanted to share that with you. So this morning, up first, we've got Karin Derry, former state representative. There you are, Karin. How are you this morning?
Great. How are you doing?
Well, I am great. It's always a pleasure to see you. And I've asked former Rep Derry if she would be so kind as to periodically, on an ongoing basis, give us a heads up as to what's going on over in the Capitol building. So this week, obviously, a big week, and session was just gavelled in a couple weeks ago. So what's going on this week, Ms. Derry?
Yeah, it is hard to believe they've only been in session for 2 weeks because, my goodness, some of the bills that are coming through, one would think it would take years to do that much damage to the state. A few things that are really concerning right now for many people. We've got 2 amendments to the Constitution that are making their way through the process. They've been through subcommittees, moving their way through committees on the House and the Senate side. One is a bill that would say basically that the Iowa Constitution does not guarantee a right to an abortion. And, that I think for a lot of people seems harmless enough. Why, the word abortion isn't in the Iowa Constitution. Why do we need to add that? Well, the concern with that, of course, is that any kind of restriction on abortion that would come up in the future. So let's say in 2 years, after this amendment is added to the Iowa Constitution, the legislature wants to pass a bill that says, all abortion is outlawed in the state of Iowa. If there's no constitutional protection for an abortion, there's nothing then to allow the courts to say, nope, that's not constitutional, can't do that. So it's very, very concerning to a lot of people who, regardless how they feel personally about abortion, don't want the government interfering with a woman's right to make important healthcare decisions. So that's one that's really concerning. It was up last year. It didn't get through at the Iowa House last year, but now with their larger majority, there's a very big concern that it will. So that's one of the constitutional amendments. The other one is one related to weapons. What it does basically is it adds the Second Amendment to the Iowa Constitution. Right now, Iowa does not have language that right to bear arms in our Iowa Constitution. And, that again seems harmless enough, but in the language that they want to add to the Iowa Constitution, it includes this high legal standard of strict scrutiny. And what it says is that any kind of weapons law or regulation needs to pass strict scrutiny, which is the very, very highest legal standard. And that means that sensible gun regulations, like you can't bring guns into elementary schools, may not pass that high legal standard. If we wanted to implement background checks or red flag laws, measures that the majority of people are in favor of, it likely wouldn't pass that high strict scrutiny standard. So those are two of the constitutional amendments that are really worrisome, that are making their way through the process. And I'm really encouraging people to reach out to their state lawmakers and let them know that they're concerned about these moving forward.
And it's interesting, too, as far as political strategy, changing the state constitution is not a small measure. Does not happen very often. When you were a state rep, I don't think there's been any changes to it for a long time, right? For instance, no changes happened while you were a state rep.
No. Although so in order to change the Iowa Constitution, the bill has to pass in two general assemblies. So the strict scrutiny with the Second Amendment measure passed last General Assembly when I was there. So it needs to pass this General Assembly before it can go on a ballot. And one thing that's kind of interesting that I don't think a lot of people know about last year when the gun bill passed the General Assembly is that House Democrats, we offered to compromise. We said, if you just want to add the language from the federal Second Amendment about the right to bear arms, because most of us, respect the rights under the federal Second Amendment, we would have voted for that. I would have voted to add the, language from the federal Second Amendment to the Iowa Constitution. The concern is adding the strict scrutiny standard. That's where the danger is.
Interesting. So you were a state representative. They were gavelled in just a couple weeks ago. How do you feel, Miss Derry, not being up there on the Hill?
Oh, every so often people will send me a note and say, "Oh boy, I bet with people running around maskless and all the craziness going on, I bet you're somewhat relieved." And I am very concerned about the health and well-being of many of my friends who are working in the Capitol right now because there is no mask mandate. But with all that said, I would far rather be at the state Capitol these days working on behalf of my constituents. It was a great opportunity, such an honor, and it really is very, very rewarding work. And we can do better than who we have in the majority right now.
Former state rep Karin Derry, what an honor to have you with us, and hope to see you back here again in the near future.
I would enjoy that very much. Take care, Brent.
You too. Be safe today. Lots of snow coming up. And folks, we're going to come right back with our conversation with Jane Owen. But first, we're going to show you a video that the United Nations was kind enough to provide about their refugee program. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
When the crisis raised, all my dreams has been destroyed.
Yo nunca pensé salir de mi país.
Ile yote ilituogopesha sana, na mpaka hivi tulikimbia mikono wazi.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to the program. You know, one of my favorite people on the West Coast is Jane Owen. She has one of the leading public relations firms in Los Angeles that we're going to tell you about as well. But she's done something, well, she's done a lot of amazing things in the last little while since I've seen her face to face. Not only did she start a family, but she wrote a children's book called Tom Woof and Max the Owl. It's the most charming book you'll ever hear about. There's the cover of it. Jane, why don't you tell folks about the book and about what you're up to?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here with you. It's one of those things where, you know, my PR company, I've been doing PR for more than 20 years, and, you know, it took up all my time, and it was going very, very well. And unfortunately, just before the pandemic, we had kind of switched over to doing a lot of live events. Bad timing. And obviously, like as soon as the pandemic kind of took hold, all of that disappeared. And it was very scary, actually. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. You know, suddenly I went from being really busy and not having any time to basically having no work, no income, and a lot of time on my hands. And it was very scary, and I was quite upset about it, I won't lie. And then I thought to myself, well, now you have to do those things that you said you were going to do if you ever had the time to do them. Like, you have no excuses now. And I've always wanted to write a book. My family comes from a literary background. My dad's a writer as well. And my great grandfather was an editor, a book editor, and he worked at Scribner's and Sons in New York, and he edited Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, Thomas Wolfe. And just recently in 2016, they brought out a movie called Genius with Colin Firth playing my great grandfather, Max Perkins. Laura Linney played my great grandmother. Jude Law played Thomas Wolfe. Nicole Kidman played his mistress, girlfriend. It was a lovely movie. We were very honored that they chose my great grandfather to make a movie about. I mean, it's a hard thing to make an exciting movie about, editing a book. But they did a great job. And you know, he went from being someone that basically no one, unless you were in the literary world, you probably have never heard of Max Perkins, to being someone that, you know, a few more people had heard of. And my partner, Fernando, who's a filmmaker, he was very proud. Scott Fitzgerald is one of his favorite authors, and so he would tell people, you know, my girlfriend's great grandfather was Max Perkins, who edited, and when he would get to Thomas Wolfe, he would say Thomas Woof because of his lovely accent. And I always thought, that's so charming and hysterical. Imagine if there was a puppy, a character called Thomas Woof, who was a puppy, and imagine if he had all the characteristics of the author, and then there would have to be a Max character who would be his like mentor and editor, and then that's kind of how it all that's where the idea came from.
Well, it's so charming because in the book they're writing little stories. I mean, Tom Wolfe is a storyteller.
Yeah.
And he writes stories wherever he can, and then the other character is going to help shape. So it's like he's a little animal book editor. I mean, it's the sweetest little thing. And folks, the illustrations in this book are just so charming. Let's here, I'll show you this. It's just a lovely watercolor motif. I mean, folks, these drawings have such. There's just such care given to the art. Tell us about the artist who did it, and what was that process like?
So the house that you see, the farmhouse, is actually inspired by my father's real farmhouse, which is in Dorset, in England. And the illustrator is a lovely person who lives in Russia, and we found each other online. And I was she didn't want any credit in the book, which is weird, but I'm going to give her credit on the website. So if anybody's looking at these illustrations and needs a wonderful illustrator, they can get in touch with her. But she was really great. We worked together every day for a long time on the illustrations, and I wanted them to be very personal. My mother and my stepfather sadly passed away right before the book came out. And so it's dedicated to them. And then the house in the story is my biological father's, his house. So I feel like it's very personal. It's based on our family history, and it's set in our family home, and it's dedicated to my mom and stepdad. So it's a very personal book to me, obviously.
Well, it's so lovely. And, I think those are the projects that usually have the longest legs when they have something really personal to something. You can sense that. You can sense that when you read it. You don't know when you page into something like, oh, Jane wrote a children's book. I'd be happy to read it, but it is engrossing, and it is. It was. I have a little one. She's almost 3 years old. And when you read children's books I read your children's book to her, and she loved it, and she was raptured, and she'd touch the pages with me. And what I learned is there are two kinds of children's books. There's one that are written by folks who don't have kids, and then there's other ones that are written for ones that have kids, and yours can tell that you have that connection because there's much more to it. It's not just pictures and, oh, this is something that's going to pass time for kids. It's a nice, it pulls you in gently, and it's a very sweet and caring story about this Tom Wolfe's just running around writing stories everywhere.
Well, that was the other thing, is that I was writing it during the pandemic, and we were very much besieged by these riots and protests around where we live. Do you remember that? It was a horrible time in LA. We were in lockdown, and then there were the Black Lives Matters protests, and then they, unfortunately, these very well-meaning protests that had a very good reason for happening. A lot of people took advantage of that, and there was looting, and there was vandalism and all of that kind of stuff. And I started thinking while I was writing the book about how the youth of today, they have so much to say, and they have so much passion, and they want so much to make a difference and to communicate. But, oftentimes they don't choose the right ways to do it. There's like a big difference between the older generation and the youth, like in every aspect. And I think that the young people want to communicate, and sometimes they just haven't been taught the right ways to do it. And I think that was one of the things I wanted to express in the book, is like Tom Wolfe, the puppy, he wants to tell these stories desperately. He wants the animals to hear the stories, and he's writing them all over the place, but they don't see the stories he's writing. They just see, oh, he's made a mess, and he's vandalizing, and they focus so much on the vandalism that they're not reading the words. So when Max the Owl says, maybe you shouldn't write your stories on the side of someone's home, or maybe you shouldn't write them on their backs while they're sleeping. Maybe it'd be better if you wrote them in a book on paper. and then when he does that, the animals are like, oh, he goes around and he cleans up all of the mess that he's made, and then he writes the stories down in a book, and suddenly the animals are like, oh, we love these stories. And I was hoping that message would kind of somehow resonate with kids, of like, if I want to tell a story, or if I want to get my message across, maybe there's a way that I haven't tried yet that will get through to my parents, my teacher, whatever the older person is in the story.
Well, I had to, when I was reading it, I had to email you. There's this lovely little part where Thomas Wolfe, he just needs something to write on. He actually writes on the belly of one of the little sheep. And that is just, you can just imagine like a sheep just laying there, this little puppy writing a story on him. There were just so many, creative moments like that. And, this is definitely a flight of fancy book. It's nice that, you weren't tied down necessarily, obviously, to reality, but there is a nice sense of, friendship and mentorship in it. And, I was thinking about the kind of warm fuzzies you feel when you watch a movie like Babe, when you see the farm animals interact. And it's a lovely book. Why don't you tell folks where they can get it?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon at the moment. Amazon through Kindle and also in paperback. There's a limited edition of hardbacks that I'm working on. If I hit a certain amount of sales on Amazon, I get to sell my hardbacks in regular bookstores. That's like the prize that you win. So yeah, at the moment it's Amazon, Amazon only at the moment.
And tell folks about your PR background. That's when I had the good fortune to meet you.
Yeah,
back in Los Angeles. I mean, give people an idea of the Jane Owen, Los Angeles legendary publicist.
Oh my goodness. Well, I've been doing PR pretty much my whole life. I moved to LA when I was 21 to continue to do PR over here, and I didn't know anybody, and I kind of got myself invited to some events and met some people, and then slowly infiltrated into the Hollywood scene here. And now I've owned my own company. It'll be 10 years this year. I had a company before this for a few years with a business partner, but this is my company, and I have a really nice, good team of people. We have opened an office in London last year, and we've worked all over the world. We've worked with governments like the government of Dubai and the government of England, and we've also worked for movies for a long time and a lot of big campaigns. Work with Tom DeSanto, who created the X-Men and Transformers franchise. But we also, currently we represent Jason Oppenheim and the Oppenheim Group from Selling Sunset, as well as Mary, Romaine, and Amanza from the same show. We're working with a writer-director right now who has a show coming out on HBO in a couple of weeks called The Lady in the Dale. Working with all kinds of things, startups, people who are new to the industry, people who have been around for a long time, anybody who we feel like we can do a really good job for. That's my bar when I'm choosing a client. Can I actually be successful for you? And if the answer is yes, then we work out all the details after that.
Well, folks, Jane Owen, I no longer live in Los Angeles, but before the pandemic and when I was living there, I had the good fortune of attending many of your wonderful get-togethers. Met some fascinating
Hopefully
people
that
there.
will happen again at some point in the future.
Hopefully. I'll be on the first plane. Jane Owen, public relations extraordinaire, and now children's book author. Congratulations on the book, and thanks so much for coming on the program.
And it's the first in a series. I'm going to be writing another one. I'm currently writing another one, about a new character based on F. Scott Fitzgerald, who's a fox who comes to live at the farm, and Tom Wolfe gets very jealous. So it looks at children and jealousy. How do you manage
that's fantastic. I'm a big F. Scott Fitzgerald fan as well. I was in Los Angeles with a friend, and we were having one of these Thanksgivings where you couldn't go home, so we all went to this person's house that we kind of knew, and they all kind of knew each other. And I'm looking at a photo on the wall, and I said, "Why does that photo look familiar?" And they said, "Oh, that's F. Scott Fitzgerald." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Why do you have a picture of and surrounded by family?" And they said, "Oh, that's Scott Fitzgerald is my grandmother." I said, "Scout Fitzgerald." I said, "You're kidding me." So all the interesting little literary crossovers. But I just watched the classic version of Gatsby just last week with Robert Redford. And it's interesting when you read those books now and you see those films, and it's almost like watching Downton Abbey in a way that you have, it feels so separated from, this world of conflict that we seem to find ourselves in right now.
Yes. Although if you know the great grandson of F. Scott Fitzgerald, I would love to meet him. It would be interesting to get Max Perkins and Scott Fitzgerald families together. I remember meeting Marielle Hemingway, and we had a lovely chat about her grandfather and my great-grandfather's relationship.
That is such a great story. Well, good luck. Best of luck writing this new book.
Thank
And
you.
we'll talk offline about that connection. Happy to
Yeah.
share that with you. And folks, go to Amazon, especially, it's a perfect gift book. It's a book that if you give it as a gift, you'll get a phone call back that said, this is such a lovely little book.
Thank you so much.
Lovely illustrations. Congratulations, Jane. And folks, we're going to take a quick little break, and we'll be more right back here with more of the program. Don't go anywhere.
There's a new spin on casual dining near Drake University. Lucky Horse Beer and Burgers. Craveable faves, flatbreads, delicious burgers, frozen cocktails, and a crazy cool vibe. Get to Lucky Horse Beer and Burgers today.
And tomorrow, folks, we've got Brendan Gutenschwager. Brendan is a videographer, and he was one of the folks on hand at the Capitol riot. He was filming with his cell phone, and he's got some amazing video there that has literally now been used millions of times in news coverage all around the world on the Capitol riot. So he's going to be with us tomorrow, walking us through that very harrowing day. Also, Amy Vose is going to be here tomorrow with a new invention that moms are going to, and dads, of course, are going to want to take a look at. All that's tomorrow on the program. And the snow has not started yet, folks. We're expecting a foot here in central Iowa. It hasn't started yet, but it is 100% chance of snow is what the forecasts are saying. So be safe today. We will see you tomorrow morning. Thanks for watching.